So the first question I have for you is how and where did you find wrestling, and in what way would you say it's impacted your life?
Well, I'd probably give a little bit of background. I'm from a small town in northwestern Pennsylvania. We didn't have much to do back in the 70s and the 80s. So you had two sports in the winter, basketball and wrestling. And that's all we had, growing up in that area. Wasn't a very rich area of the country. It was a steel city area. And then as the steel was drying up and going away, still manufacturing and some plastics in that area. But yeah, we couldn't go snow skiing. We didn't do things like that, but it was an inexpensive sport for people to do or for young kids to do. And
Mhm.
and I've had a elementary school buddy, and I can't think we were in fourth grade. He said, "Hey, I'm going to wrestle. Do you want to wrestle?" And I said, "Well, I don't know much about it." And I kind of thought it was, the WWF stuff, coming off the rope
Right.
and things like that. And he talked me into it. And I started wrestling when I was 8 years old and won my first wrestling tournament when I was 8 years old.
So you'd say that when you first became introduced to sport, that it was really kind of like a hook, like that, like you knew this was a sport that, hey, I'm going to hang on to and definitely try and continue down the road.
Well, I don't know if that was the case. I did play a little bit of basketball in elementary school, but I think my dad had decided that I was going to be a wrestler, and I
Mhm.
had no choice in the matter after that. And he persuaded me more so to wrestle than to play basketball.
Right. Well, kind of staying on that topic of still finding wrestling and going from there. So you wrestled for Corey High School, and you had a very decorated prep career. You were a three-time junior Olympic champion, high school freestyle state champion, and Keystone Games, multi-time league champ, region champ. Well, you're region champ, section champ, and then finished off with a third place finish in the Pennsylvania State Tournament. What were some of your takeaways from your prep career?
Well, I was blessed that coming up through and I guess before we start all this, and I was rehearsing a little bit about what we were going to talk about, and I kept saying I did this and I did that, and quite honestly, there's a lot of we in here that you probably don't we don't talk about enough. So I had some fantastic coaches that helped me through my career, and as a young kid all the way up through college. My YMCA coach, when I was in that 8-year-old group, was a Division II All-American at Edinburgh University. And then as you go in through, junior high school, and my high school coach was the Division II Pennsylvania Coach of the Year. So that was in the entire state of Pennsylvania. But more interestingly about that, he wrestled at University of Kentucky,
Wow.
and just by chance, he wrestled Ethan Reeve in the SEC championship. So what a small world! But we talked about that, and I had, like I said, some very good pedigree. My hometown had some very good wrestlers come out of it. We were known for deer hunting in high school wrestling. And we actually had a national champ come out of my town, Jim Bennett, who wrestled at
Wow.
Yale University. And he wrestled when Ethan and Scott Kroll did back in the 70s. He was a national champ. And I think he took fourth at one point also. So, yeah, we talked about pedigree. That's what our town was known for wrestling. That whole area of the state was.
So you would say, obviously, like you mentioned, Corey being a wrestling town, just the exposure that hot spot brought, you would say, contributed to your success in your prep career.
It did. I wrestled. There's some big names that come out of that Northwest Pennsylvania. Uh, and there were so many colleges within 30, 45 minutes to an hour that had wrestling,
Right.
and became strong wrestling. Penn State was a few hours away. We were close to Cleveland, where you had those universities. Clarion University was very strong at the time, and all those Pennsylvania schools. Big names came out of that area, like Sean O'Day, who wrestled at Edinburgh, national champ, the Costello brothers, and I was fortunate enough to wrestle Nate Carr's little brothers. I think I wrestled
Wow.
3 or 4 of those kids growing up. So there was always a lot of competition. I didn't realize how good it was until I got to that next level and, saw and met a lot of people that probably didn't have the experiences that I did growing up in wrestling in that area of the country.
Right. And I have to ask, since you mentioned how close Penn State was, as a high school, did y'all ever toss around the idea or like kind of look to mix practices with those collegiate guys, like say in the off season to get that exposure?
We did not. Penn State was too far away. It was about 3-4 hours away from us. There was that university around the corner called Edinburgh, and I guess we didn't think about that at the time because I just think we worried about that they were so much better than us. But we did work out with the other wrestlers from that town, and they went over and worked out with them some. But no, we probably should. A little different than when we were UTC, and I remember high school kids coming in and working out with us, which I wish we had done. But we did have some kids that came out of our school, my high school, that went on to wrestle. One wrestled at Clarion, and he came back and we worked out together on occasion.
Well, you mentioned especially UTC and high school wrestlers coming in, and that brings up an interesting thought. When I had Rocco Mansueto on here for our first episode, we discussed that when Rocco and his brother Philip were coming through high school, that was really when that wrestling year-round trend came into effect. Not taking an off season and continuing to wrestle through Fargo and all that. And throughout the 80s, it started to grow as well. But you mentioned that high school wrestlers come over to UTC. That does point out the fact that there was that trend was climbing during that time of getting different exposure to different levels of competition and et cetera.
Yeah, when I came through high school, you had the three sports. You had your football and cross country in the fall. Then you had wrestling, basketball in winter, and then spring you had track. And we didn't have a baseball team, surprisingly, and I still don't think my high school does. But you had varied sports, and I started to see that probably when I started coaching that kids, in that time frame in the early 2000s and probably in the late 90s when I wasn't, involved in coaching, on a full-time basis. But yeah, I saw kids specializing and they were focusing 24/7 on one sport. And then, of course, the sport opened up where you could wrestle basically every month of the year. I don't think there was a downtime that I could remember that, and you're probably seeing it with what you're doing. I mean, you could probably wrestle 12 months out of the year somewhere.
Right. No, those tournaments really opened up, and like you mentioned, throughout every month, whether it be March, April, May, June, July, there's some wrestlers that I know that as soon as the state tournament, say for Tennessee, it's in late February, as it is for most high school areas. Most of them, they're doing the state tournament, they're turning right back around for Virginia Beach in late March.
Yeah.
And there's some freestyle and Greco stuff really after that, and then it'll you have national duels back up in Virginia Beach. So it really just the clock keeps going.
Right.
Now, kind of moving on to past the prep career. So obviously you get wrestled for UTC. Ultimately, what made you decide to pick UTC as the place where you wanted to continue your academic and athletic career?
Well, it's kind of a comical story, to a degree. I took that year off. When I say I took that year off, I played football and I gave 100% of that, and opted to get back into wrestling. And I looked at a couple colleges back up in Pennsylvania, Edinburgh University, and Clarion. Still interested and I just didn't feel I was a Division I wrestler. And so I decided to reach out to schools that had recruited me in the past. And back in high school, and we talked about my hometown, it became a plastics town after the steel dried up. So the late great Bob Myers was in my hometown making a sales call on a company. He met with the president and they started talking wrestling. Wow. And the president was saying, "Hey, we got a couple kids here in Corey. You need to go watch Wrestle. If you want to recruit these kids for wrestling, you need to talk to them." And just by chance, we were wrestling that night. Bob Myers came over and saw us wrestle. As he went back, he reported it back to Jim Morgan, and Jim Morgan and Bud Hannibal recruited me. Because you always need big guys wrestling. I was, 67, 70, 77 back then. Well, as I decided to go and play football, I reached back out to Chattanooga. I thought Chattanooga was a Division II school. and I thought it'd probably be a better fit for me than Division One.
Right.
Well, I called and Bud answered the phone, Bud Hannibal, and we chatted, and he was, he made me feel really, really good. He was excited. He wanted me to come wrestle there, and I'd asked him, and I said, well, I don't know if I'm a Division One wrestler. He said, I think you are, Charlie. We'll just get you down here, and we'll get you, get you back into it. So, then probably about 30 minutes later, Bob Myers called me. He said, hey, we want you to come to UT Chattanooga. We're looking forward to getting together again. Let's talk to Ethan Reeve. Okay, the new head coach, Jim Morgan, had retired, and Ethan had come in. Well, Ethan wasn't as enthusiastic as the other two. He wasn't really interested in me coming to UT Chattanooga. And he was nice, he was polite, but he told me there was this big stud wrestler that he had down in Murray County, Georgia, that he wanted, and that was going to be his 77, 90 pounder. And he, thanked me for my time, wished me the best of luck. So we hung up, and I, of course I understood that. I took a year off. He probably questioned, if I really wanted to be in the sport. And I don't know, maybe a few hours later, the phone rang, and it was Bud Hannibal. I said, well, how'd the conversation go with Ethan? I said, well, he doesn't want me. And Bud said, oh my God, no, Charlie, we want you. You're going to wrestle here at UT Chattanooga. I'm going to talk to him. Don't worry about it. We're going to get you here. So Ethan calls back and reluctantly, I think, said, yeah, sure. I guess, these guys want you. So why don't you come on down and check out the university? Well, I thought, hey, Ethan will fly me down, from Pittsburgh. He said, no, I'm not flying you down. You got to find your way down here. And I said, well, can you at least pay for my bus trip? And he said, well, it depends on how much it is. Well, at the time, Bluebird was running a special $99 anywhere in the country round trip. If you want to fly, if you want to go from, San Diego to, to Boston, it was $99 round trip. So he did pay for a 24-hour one-way bus ticket from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to UT Chattanooga, and then 24 hours back. And I think he thought if I really wanted to come here, I would do something like that. But
right.
Yeah, that to me, it's a funny story, but that's what got me down to Chattanooga, was a 24-hour bus trip one way to check out the university.
Well, and you mentioned that, and you mentioned how Ethan Reeve over that phone call was talking about a wrestler from Murray County, Georgia, that he wanted. Correct me if I'm wrong, but would that happen to be Chris Thornberry?
Yes, it was. And I probably would have talked about that later with you, but yeah, Chris Thornberry was my workout partner for 4 years, roommate for 3 years. I was in his wedding. Yeah, so that's who his big stud was that he wanted, and he didn't want me.
Well, like you said, you mentioned Murray County, and that immediately came to mind. I thought, well, that reminds me of somebody.
There's only one. He's a legend down there.
Oh, absolutely. Now, when you got to UTC at first, I believe y'all would have been in there around the same time. And actually, he mentioned you as well. You were practice partners with Thornberry and Ruffalo for a good while, correct?
Well, my day-to-day, touching every day was Thornberry. He was my workout partner for 4 years. Ruffalo was, one of the, I tried drilling with him a couple times, but we wrestled each other live. There wasn't many big guys in the room. So anybody about 167 or more, there wasn't many of us until I think maybe like my junior year, we started getting some other big guys in the room. But yeah, we worked out, there wasn't many of us. So yeah, we wrestled each other every day.
Right. And that, I think, honestly, that would give you a pretty good exposure, just because I think Ruffalo at that time was wrestling 184, 190, and you were down in 177, and Thornberry was kind of right in the middle of that, around the same weight as Ruffalo, I believe. So it provided a pretty legendary group to practice with and learn from. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, staying on the topic of UTC, so after making the move down south, what was it like at first adapting to the college room and that environment? Well,
coming from my high school room, I didn't see that big of a difference, meaning that we were all freshmen. I mean, Ethan had through when you interviewed him, he had, I don't say he ran people off, they ran themselves off, but they just decided they didn't want to wrestle for the guys. So basically that room when I went in there, we had a couple upperclassmen, but the majority of them were freshmen. So,
Right.
coming into that room, I couldn't imagine what it would have been like if gone to a Clarion or Edinburgh at that particular point. But I mean, we grew that room to where it was a Division I room, and we wrestled like that. But coming down from Pennsylvania, like I said, my high school coach had wrestled against Ethan. So I mean, he had his same type of tough mentality. We didn't sit during practice. We constantly moved. So it wasn't a whole lot different than what I'd experienced from Scott Kroll at Corey High School.
Was there compared to Ethan Reed's practices compared to your high school practices, was there a difference in how it was regimented?
Not really. I mean, he had his regimented time of when practice started, what we did, when we were out of there. Very similar in how it was run.
Right. Well, I was thinking because when he explained to me, and same with Ruffalo and Thornberry that have said the same thing, is his practices, you knew what you were going to do, and he knew what the purpose was behind it.
Yeah.
And I personally agree with him on this, and I think that some of the most progress you get out of practice is from drilling rather than live. That repetition of putting together those, your style and your go-to moves that you're going to need out there for different scenarios and for the match as a whole.
Yeah, and I even said that. I mean, Thorny and I wrestled together for 4 years. We knew each other. We knew the setups. We knew what we were doing. I really felt I got more out of drilling with him than wrestling live. And it was, he knew what I was going to do. I knew what he was going to do. And he would just wait for me to take me down at the last few seconds of our practice matches. But I did. I thought we got more out of the high-speed drilling at that particular point. And then when you had when the young folks were coming in, I mean, we were all young back then, but when you were getting the freshmen or the transfers in, you could light up on them because they weren't very experienced. They were younger and their bodies hadn't filled out. But still, the tougher guys, I got more out of drilling, high-speed drilling with those folks or with Thorny probably than I did wrestling live with him.
Right. And you mentioned the younger guys coming in and getting a different look from them. And that brings up a very just truthful quote I've heard from Gordon Connell, really more so a statement, but he said there's 3 things you need in practice, 3 types of partners. One that you can control a match with, one that's even with you, and one that's better than you, that'll force you to have to figure things out and make more adjustments and just get better from those 3.
Right.
Now,
right, and I think we're talking about Gus, Brett Gustafsson. I hope you get an opportunity to interview him. Brett came in, skinny little 158-pounder, and we nicknamed him the Gusto Kid. Ended up being an All-American at UTC. I mean, he came in the first day, and we were lighting him up. And I heard he was pretty good in Greco, so I thought I'd be all smart aleck and try to go upper body with him, and he headlocked me on my back. So did nothing but tick me off. So I went up and continued to pound the heck out of him. But yeah, I think that those type of practices when you're younger makes you that tougher of a wrestler. And I remember being recruited, and they would tell me those things. They're like, you need to be in the room with the best of the best. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're right. Looking back, you should. And that's why people that go to the Iowas and the Penn States, and they come in, they get lit up for the first couple of years, but it makes them all Americans in the end.
Absolutely. And it just goes back to, iron sharpens iron. And one thing with this sport that is inevitable, but man, it brings a lot of benefit. And it's one of the many benefits this sport brings is going through the trials of, hard knocks and maybe not getting the best out of somebody in practice, but as long as you're going hard and you're able to tell yourself like, hey, let's come back in tomorrow, try again, and just there's a light at the end, no matter how hard this practice is, and vice versa.
You're right. You get up and dust yourself off and every day, and then you go back, and that's what practice is for. Some people think that you got to win in practice. No, I want to get pinned in practice. I want to try and move, and if it doesn't work and I get pinned, I don't lose anything. So let's try new things. Let's work. And if you get beat by your 142 pounder because you're trying new things, that's what happens. And it doesn't, it's not in the record book at the end of the day.
Right. No, it's just like I said, you brush it off. Every day is a new day, and technically every practice is a new practice. You never know what could happen. But it's always just beneficial to take just a little bit of knowledge away from every practice.
Yeah, you're right.
Something and think back on something and be like, hey, that's what I got to fix, and this is what I could have done better, and all that.
And that's the kind of the good and the bad. You always look at what you did bad and what you did wrong, but you should probably look at what you did well too. And I don't think we ever dwelled on that enough. We always thought about what we did wrong and tried to correct it. But that's what made us winners.
Well, Ethan Reeve really reiterated that. He pretty much said it's better to know 3 moves like the back of your hand rather than 20 moves that you may have hit once.
True. Yeah, I thought about that. I had very good single leg, for a big guy, and that got me well into the NCAAs.
Right. No, those once you get a move down pat, and you have the confidence that goes behind it too, which I think is a very important factor, especially in a sport like this, is having confidence. Even say in a case where you're outmatched, you can just go out there and wrestle and try your best. You never know what could happen. That's the benefit. Well, that's one of the should say the glories about this sport is anything can happen on any given day. Well, kind of continuing from UTC and all that. So your senior year, you wrestled 190 pounds, and you undoubtedly had the best season of, I would say, any 190-pound mock. What was your mindset in that season, and overall, what was that senior season like?
Well, I think I did have the best single season of a 190-pounder in UTC history, unless. I don't know Pat Murphy well. I've met him a few times. Unless Pat Murphy had a season that I'm not aware of, but that's obviously before the internet. But went out my junior year. We went out to the nationals, got to the quarterfinals, and then we stepped on the mat with Iowa. Right? There's no we to it. I stepped on the mat with Iowa, but I didn't step off as I wanted to, and just saw that was a different league of wrestling than what I had been wrestling. So, came back to Chattanooga, of course, obviously not very happy with that, but, started to decide, hey, what do I need to do different? And I hooked up with Athletes in Action and traveled over in Europe and wrestled in Europe for an entire summer. And I came back and I had a different mindset, had some skills that I didn't have, had talked to some folks who worked with some stuff, and obviously worked with the several Olympians when I was over there, the best we could do with the language barrier, but came back and I'd worked out all summer with Bob Myers and worked on his Myers program, and of course used Ethan's program too, a combination of the two. But I came back, I was ready to wrestle and I was ready to do something. And I say it was just a tougher mindset. And I remember one of the freshmen saying to me, because you guys are mean to us. I'm like, no, son, this is Division I wrestling. Being mean. This is how we wrestle at Division I level. You better get used to it, or you better go somewhere else. And it was just the way we had stepped up. And I think I brought that back to Chris and the group. And like I said, we kind of put it to each other when I first got back. And of course, they got tougher at that point. Everybody, stepped it up. But anyway, just all of a sudden started winning and winning tournaments. And the first tournament we went to was West Virginia Open, and I won that tournament with I beat a kid in the finals from Slippery Rock who was really good. Then won the Southern Open. Beat some guys there. Beat the App State kid, and then all of a sudden the rankings came out. I ranked 3rd in the country. Not only individually proud. I mean, I was proud of that fact, but I'm proud that put UTC on the map. Right. We dabbled with it earlier in my career, but when you get UTC Chattanooga as a kid ranked 3rd in the country, we hadn't done that since Charlie Hurd. So I thought that would said a lot about the program, where we were going at that particular time, and the national recognition that we were getting. And then just when you walked into places, people knew who you were, and people were running from you, didn't want to wrestle you, wrestle guys that would run to the edge of the mat and stand there. But so yeah, it was a little different being the hunted versus the hunter,
Right.
but went on and had great season. Injuries, couple injuries, hurt the end game, but anyway, it was just I was ready to step up to that major Big Ten level of wrestling. I felt after that
Mhm.
summer.
Now that senior year, obviously, I assume there were various different goals, but what was your like ultimate goal during that season?
What was that? It was to be an All-American. That was it. It was there was no other goal but that. And you went to bed thinking that, got up in the mornings, Thorny and I still reminisce about this. And, during the first semester, we were at the gym and we're at the weight room at, 5:30, 6 in the morning. We had our curl bar with us and what we felt we weren't getting at practice, we were supplementing it on our own. But,
Mhm.
we were driven. We were both driven and we both, got to the quarterfinals that year. I mean, Thorny was right there he had some close matches and, referee's decision went the other way. He'd be,
Right.
an All-American. But yeah, it was, that was our goal, and we ate it, drank it, and that's really all we talked about.
So with that senior year and with that coming to a close eventually in March, all in all, what were your takeaways from your collegiate career?
Well, my takeaways, and it took me a long time to admit it, but I was very disappointed I didn't All-American. Didn't like how it ended. Injuries. When you end your career on an injury, it's never how you want to end it.
Mhm.
So very disappointed. And and I mean, I would have been delighted if Chris had gotten through and gotten there, or any of the guys, quite honestly. But um, anyway, it took a while to I guess kind of eat that. And I think what happened one day, I was somewhere and old wrestlers always talk. We talked, some of the other wrestlers talked about that fraternity, and I'd met some guys and they knew who I was just by my name. A
Right.
couple funny stories on that, but and everybody's asked, well, how'd you do? And then you tell them, just what you saw in my bio. Kind of gave them a short version of that, and I said, I just didn't make the All-American round. They're like, dude, if it's any consolation, you've done better than 99% of the wrestlers that ever stepped on the mat. Again, it's not what I was looking for. It's something I can't hang my hat on. And now, with a call like this, being recognized as probably having the best year of anybody in the 190-pound class at Chattanooga, that's something I'm still proud of.
Well, it was a legendary career and it still stands, and whether it be the names on the board or like you mentioned, the recognition
Mhm.
like this, it's in the history books. You can't change that, and the hard work and determination that is a huge factor in the sport. Um, Obviously, I believe contributed to that, and it's an idolization in a way with that career.
Yeah, it is. And every program works hard, but you've got those, with that, you've got to have some skill and technique and evidently some talent. And I thought we were there when I was in at Chattanooga.
Well, like you mentioned before, and I'd agree 100%. It was a legendary crew. UTC has had many great wrestlers, many
Hmm.
legendary wrestlers, whether that be in the D2 scene throughout the 70s and 80s when they actually they made a change in the very early 80s, but and then going through the D1 scene as well, like you mentioned, yourself, Thornberry, Ruffalo, Buckshaw, Matt Keller, Cody Cleveland, Charlie Hurd, and all of those guys, just help really cement those history
Oh yeah.
books. And still, the people that are still in the program and coming up, you look at Waddell, you look at Fabian Gutierrez. UTC is definitely still there, and rightfully so, because you don't get there for no reason.
No, no, and I always thought it was a great program with a lot of potential, and I'd like to see it come back to national prominence. And during my time, we were 14-1 my junior year, and I'm not sure what we were ranked, but my senior year we were ranked as high as 13th at one time in the nation. And obviously that's something that you're always proud of when you can tell people you're on the 13th ranked team in the country.
Oh, especially in college in general, but on that D1 scene, you know, where wrestling is always tough across the board,
Yeah.
but it's an aforementioned different world out there for collegiate wrestling, and it's a different world further than that when you go to the international scene.
Different level, man, different level at that point. I had the benefit of stepping on the mat with some of those great people that are, you know, well-known people, you know, the Mike Sheets, Chris Edmonds. You know, I stepped up toe to toe with those guys, and granted, didn't turn out good for me, but I can at least say I got there, and they were definitely at a different level, just such an elite level, elite athletes.
And you know, there's in every match, I believe there's always a lesson that comes out of it, whether it be in a large factor or a small factor. But like like you said, that guy earlier mentioned, you know, just being there and being able to go that far and step on the mat with those people.
Yeah, you know, and Thorny and I, you know, I remember, you know, when we were at the Nationals our freshman year, and we went out there and I won my first match, beat the kid from the division, or from Big Ten, a kid from Michigan. And I just, I found his weakness, and it was in tilts. And I tilted the heck out of him, tilted him with the last, you know, second. But Thorny and I left there, and we made a promise to ourselves. We're like, hey, Charlie, hey, you know, Chris and Charlie, we're not going to be 1-5 in our career here at UTC at the national level. We're gonna get here, and we're gonna make, you know, make ourselves known, make our school known, and we're gonna win matches, and we'll be all Americans. We both fell a little short, but still, our goal, we that was one of our goals, and then I think we made our presence felt there.
Absolutely, you know, definitely. Like I said, it will go down in the history books and the legendary squadron with legendary wrestlers, and you know, it takes a village, but personally believe everyone really, like you said, brought that presence to that national scene.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you for joining me. It's been awesome to interview you and discuss, you know, UTC wrestling and much more.
Yeah, it was a great to talk to you. Good luck with your sport. Hope you grow with it. I hope you know, when you get done in high school, you go to the next level. It's definitely exciting, and it's something that you'll always look back and you know, fond memories of.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You know, the season will be here before you know it. This season flies by, but we'll looking forward to it though.
Okay. My pleasure, Mason. Thank you so much.
Well, likewise. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Have a great day.